So this is my PureRef reference imaging. As we can see here, that I've basically taken my inspiration from basically the Star Wars universe. So I've got Mandalorian style themes here. Um, what I was thinking is I was going to try and remake the town Mos Eisley on Tatooine, which is from the Star Wars universe and from the Mandalorian. Um, Mos Eisley is essentially a kind of a desolate, sandy, rundown town that's kind of reserved for outlaws and bandits and things. Um, so if I show you this reference image, this is the kind of vibe I was going for. So it's really sandy and kind of quite sunny. There's like these sandstone buildings that it kind of matches the landscape and the color and vibe. Essentially, the buildings that I was going to use was I was going to use this as my main centerpiece. This is going to be quite a big building. This has just been made in BSP for now. I need to actually model this in Maya. And going down here, I quite like these buildings here, these different styles. We can see the front and the back of these two buildings. We can see that they've got quite good detail for piping, and they've got these like sand breakers, which are going to basically stop the sand from just blasting against the buildings all day. And moving down here, I've got this little igloo style building that I'd like to model. This is just a quick design layout that I've made out in Paint. As you can see, I've got smaller rectangles and other squares and things just to indicate where the buildings are going to be. So if we look at the player start here, this is where the player will be starting. I've got some arrows that are just going to be going through the map. This will indicate where the player can move. So we've got a free movement up to the middle of the town here. We can turn left and then right, and kind of go from there. So some of the rectangles and squares are bigger than the others. This just indicates that the buildings have different shapes and sizes. The circles on top are going to indicate where the sphere placement on the top of the buildings are. These red indicated squares, these are going to be showing as partially buried buildings. So I've got three in total that are going to be partially buried. I'm essentially just going to reuse textured modelled buildings and just place them in such a way that they look like they've been buried in the landscape. So this is my BSP layout of my Mos Eisley map. Um, so as you can see, I've got everything just in basic BSP for now. I wanted to make sure all the layout was okay, the scaling was okay before I start modeling all into Maya. So this is just quite a rough estimate of where things are going to go for now. I've done some landscaping just so I can kind of fit my buildings in properly. I wanted to go for like a desolate Star Warsy type uh, inhospitable planet kind of vibe. So my inspiration was like Mandalorian and just the Star Wars universe and Tatooine in general. So I've buried a couple of the buildings in the terrain just to give the scene a bit more character. Um, so I'll do a quick run through so we can see where everything is in more detail. So the player start will be just at the start here, and then we walk through the main kind of square of the village. I've got my main centerpiece building here. That's going to be modelled in Maya and textured later on. So if I go this way first, I'll just show you around. So this is partially buried. This one's kind of had the sand beating against the side of it. And we go through this way. Got another kind of partially buried structure here. Then this one is not so much buried, so it's going to have nice detail on that one. And then I'm going to use the same object there, but have it buried as well. And then coming this way, yeah. So thank you. Okay, so I've essentially modelled a couple of those buildings that I've shown you previously in Maya. This is the first one that I've done. If I show you the reference image, I'll show you which one that I've tried to compare it to. So this is the reference image that I was using for that model. It's the kind of the long thin one with all the pipe detail and sand breakers on. So I'll show you more detail in Maya. Here it is. So I've got the arched doorways, the piping, the sand breakers on there. I've also done the top kind of junction box with some pipes on here. I think it all kind of connects quite well. And if we go down the back of the building, that goes to like this fan air vent, and the pipes essentially extend all the way down to the ground here. I've tried to match the pipes along this sand breaker so it makes it look like it's got kind of fluidity, so it kind of flows quite nicely against the building there. I've done a little bantha ring, which is essentially a alien horse ring where people tie up their horses when they want to go inside the house. Got some little screws and little bits of detail there on here. So continuing round, yeah, more sand breakers on the back. I've got my archways here with the little kind of foam plates on the doorway just to kind of give it that Mos Eisley vibe. If I go back to my reference image here, we can see those same kind of foam blocks on the archways. Yeah, so I still need to do some cleanup on this, and obviously I need to do the UVs and texturing on that one. But as a general model, I would say that's pretty close to being done. If I show you my next building, this is like an igloo style building. Kind of sort of the same vibe, the big sphere on the top, kind of big archways for entrances and exits. Got that pipe on the side again, the little foam blocks again, which I've grouped up there. Yeah, so another little junction box on the side. We have these little pipes again, kind of coming out of this bigger pipe. A few windows here. Got my same bantha ring with the screws on as well. And going on to the top here, I've got like a broken fan. This fan is all meant to be all skewed and broken and kind of not working anymore. So yeah, if I compare this to my reference image, here is the reference image I used for that one. Obviously this one didn't have as much detail on, this reference image doesn't have a lot of detail on it, so I kind of added my own spin and put what I thought would be on a Mos Eisley style building. And this is the result I've ended up with. Again, I need to do the UVs and texturing for this, but again, as a model, I would say that's also pretty close to being done. So Substance has obviously been a big thing for me to start using, as this is an environment art brief. I've been using Substance quite a lot. I haven't used Substance before, so it was all completely new to me. So I've kind of been learning and finding new techniques to get the look that I'm after. Um, Essentially, what I've been doing is I've been adding layers on with black masks, and then changing the color to what I need, and then adding on, for example, dirt layers, scratches layers, like rough concrete layers to make the buildings look more weathered and lived in. So if I show you my different layers here, my first layer is a dirt layer. This is all mine. Essentially, I just picked the dirt color, put it on a black mask, and then painted on some dirt. So following that, we went into some cracks. So I added in some cracks and scratches and pitting all over the side of the buildings. A lot of these techniques were used for all of the things that I model in Substance because I wanted them all to have generally the same look. I didn't want them to have the cracks and pitting in the same places. But yeah, I wanted the same kind of look for all of my buildings. Following that one, we've gone on to a dust layer. I put on like a brown dusty layer onto here, so we can see on the top here it's all kind of smudged and dirty on the walls and the top and everything. After that, I put on a roughness layer. So this was actually concrete, which I increased the height on to make it look like the bricks were all weathered and kind of broken up and everything. So not sure what that one was. And then the color was the next one. The colors of my buildings do tend to change. I didn't want all of the buildings to have one uniform, exactly the same color. I wanted there to be some uniqueness to each building. So we're going to have different height values on cracks, different height values on the concrete effect, and then just kind of different colours to make some look newer and some look more older and weathered. So just a quick update where I wanted to go in the future for this. So when I start going into post production, I would like to have some various effects in my scene. So I would like for the character to leave footprints as he's walking. So I think that would be really cool to have footprints left in the sand as you walk around. I also wanted to have some footprints kind of going down this main alleyway here, kind of going into the left and down towards the town hall. I think it'd be really cool to have a load of footprints in the sand there. I also thought about putting in some music. I kind of wanted to put in the either the Mandalorian theme tune or just some general Star Warsy type music. Obviously, that will all happen after I've finished my buildings and finished filling out the scene with some other little bits. I've got some ideas of what I want to fill the scene out with yet. I just haven't finalised those yet. Um, but yeah, the buildings are a definite. I'll definitely finish those off. Hello. This is my final major project. It's now in its finished state. Essentially, what I've done is changed and added and improved things that have been suggested by peers and my lecturer. So, first bit of feedback I had was about my landscape. Essentially, the problems I was having was it was tiling all over the place, so it didn't look very good at all. It was all just like one colour and all stretched out and looking pretty awful with the textures. So what I've done is I've added a blend layer. So I've managed to blend different textures together to make it look a lot better. I've also added ripple effects to make it look like sand dunes. So as we can see in the distance, they're kind of pointed at the top like sand dunes would be. Um, so I think that looks a lot better now. I also had some feedback about my moisture farms, which are these objects. My lecturer suggested that they were too white, and I agree. They are extremely white. The problems I was having was that on the reference image, I essentially color picked the color in substance to the reference image. So the issue I was having is that they are completely accurate to the reference image. So I've actually decided not to change the color too much on these because essentially they're totally accurate to the reference. Um, so I've just added in as much kind of pitting and scratches and dust and dirt as I can to try and make them stand out a little better. So on to my next thing, I had some more feedback about the suns. I've changed these as well. Uh, Somebody said to me that they were a little pink around the edges, which they were. So I've made them more orange and kind of set them in the distance there, so they look a lot more like suns. Obviously, there's two because Tatooine has two suns. Um, some other feedback was that this top sphere was um, too jagged. As we can see from the from the cylinder here, this is quite low poly, so you can see these streaky lines in it. That's to do with the model. That is something I would go back and change actually, but unfortunately I've run out of time. But yeah, this sphere suffered the same problems. It was really jagged around the edges, so I've gone on and changed that so that it's a lot smoother. So if I do a playthrough of my level, I'll show you around and show you some of the other things that have changed. So I'll do a quick run through. And yeah, so with the landscape as well, I've still continued my theme of burying some of the buildings. Things are in slightly different spots than they were from the BSP and previous videos. I essentially went back through and replaced some of the buildings so they're in better positions and they just look generally better. So this is my centerpiece building. That's improved again quite a lot. I fixed all the collision on this and placed some crates out the front and in the archways. So yeah, now we can go completely through this archway with no problems with collision. I've even done the edges of the archway so we can go in the gaps here. So continuing through, yeah, buried the back end again. During this project, I've learned some new skills. Firstly, amongst them would be texturing. I didn't really have much experience with texturing before this project. Essentially, what I'd been doing was just adding starter content textures or textures that I found straight onto my models, which isn't really the correct way of doing it. So during the course of the project, I've gone and learned Substance Painter and a little bit of Photoshop. That's more just for a tool rather than a painting software for me at the moment. So yeah, in Substance Painter, everything on these buildings and all the objects are all my own textures. Everything from the doors to the buildings themselves to the door control panel to pretty much every object that we can see here has all been textured myself. If I take us into Substance Painter just for an example, so we can see here that I've kind of added various different alphas to this little metal control box, and I've done some roughness blending and different kind of painting brushes and things like that to give it a kind of a rough stone look. Everything down to dirt as well. These are all my own textures. So if I just kind of show you everything that's kind of been textured by me, everything down to the droids as well. Everything on here is all mine. So I've put little rust patches on its feet and on its face here, and for the same with this one. So I tried to vary up my buildings, not drastically, but a little bit between each one. So this one is slightly lighter, but a bit rougher than the others. This one has a lot more cracks and is a lot more dirty than the other one. So I wanted this one to look quite old, like it's the oldest building within the town. This one is just a slightly darker shade of the stone colours that I've been using, but again, that was a new texture for that one. Um, but yeah, so texturing has been quite a big part of my project so far. Some other skills that I've learned have been the landscapes. So yeah, whilst I realise this landscape isn't perfect and it does have some tweaks that need doing, compared to some of the old landscapes I was making, this is miles better. Um, I've essentially learned how to blend two textures together with the landscape and then use two different landscape layers so that I could get these randomly raised up sections that look like sand dunes. And lastly would be the lighting. So my lighting was generally just the starter content lighting in previous projects, but for this one, I needed it to look like a desert. So I've added a like an orange hue over the edge here, and I've also added like a heat haze along everything. So I guess that would come under atmosphere, but some lighting was involved for that one. I took off the volumetric cloud because I wanted it to look as dry as possible. Um, but yeah, so my lighting is improved as well. Some of the challenges that I've managed to overcome during my project have been, for example, the texturing on this double sphere building was all showing invisible. So these sand breakers on the edges, for example, and this vent on the sides were inside out. So I figured out that the problem was that the textures were flipped in Maya. So I had to go through and flip those, and that took up quite a lot of time. To be honest, I wasn't really sure what was happening there because I was essentially taking it into Unreal here, and the main body was fine and the spheres were fine, but the sand breaks and the vents were invisible. So I had to go through and fix those, and that was just a flipped. I think it was a flip normal. So that's how I managed to fix that one. Another challenge that I've managed to overcome was all the collision on this building. Essentially, what was happening was when I was walking through my scene here, there was invisible walls all along the edges here, preventing me from getting any closer than about here on my building. and the archways had no collision at all, so I could just walk through every single piece of here, and I would just kind of float through like a ghost. So I had to go through and fix all of that collision. Essentially, what was happening was it was set to the simple collision, so I had to take that off completely and then do my own collision boxes all over. One of the challenges that I didn't manage to overcome was with the landscape. What I wanted to have was sand ripples on the texture, so like it looked like the wind had been blowing it into ripple formations. So I'll show an example of what I mean. So I mean like this. So as we can see from these reference images, the sand has all been blown into a ripple shape. I couldn't figure out a way on how to get this onto my landscape. I tried with the actual texture having a ripple effect, but it just didn't seem to want to work. So I ended up just blending it and putting on a different sand effect. But that is something that I would have loved to have had within my project. Just a side note, I think that my time management has been quite good during the course of this project. By about week 2 or week 3, I already had a full BSP layout of my buildings. I had a landscape with some buildings partially buried within it by about week 2, I believe. And then I think by about week 3, I was kind of in the full production stages of my project. I was modeling buildings. Some of the first models that I'd done was this igloo building here, and then this long building with a single sphere. These were modelled by about week 3, and yeah, as I say, I had the full layout of the BSP as well. And I think I've generally got quite a good finish on my project here. Everything's lined up nicely. A lot of the textures are pretty decent. I mean, there's imperfections here and there. For example, I've got some strange thing that's happening there on that edge, as well as here. There's some shading and shadow issues here and there. Uh, but I mean, on first glance, I don't think they're that noticeable. But generally, yeah, I think the finish is quite good. The landscape's sitting nicely, um, as well as the suns and some of my post-production things like the hue. Yeah, I think it gives it quite a good finish. So I believe that I've managed to stick quite close to my reference images. I mean, obviously they're not perfect. They don't look exactly the same as how they should on the references. But I think I've done the best I can with what I have and what skills I have so far. Um, yeah, so I'll just show you my reference imaging here so we can see my droid here. I think this is fairly close. There's obviously some imperfections and bits that are different here and there, but I believe I've put my own spin on it and kind of made it my own. My buildings as well, these are quite close. So if I show you these down here, and then this one up here, this one is very close, I believe. But yeah, I've kind of stuck through my sketches and my reference imaging all the way throughout, which has made the outcome come out quite nicely. Um, so yeah, I've really enjoyed this project. This has been one that's been going on for about 10 weeks now, and right from the start, I've been kind of doing research and modeling, texturing things that I'm interested in. I mean, everybody loves Star Wars, so be able to recapture and recreate something and from that universe and making it my own has been really really enjoyable, and I look forward to working on more soon. Thank you everyone. I'll have more for you soon, hopefully.